Another random topic. Okay, I'm back. Let's see what happens. With all of these random topics that I come up with, I think I'm going to go by the new idea of the randomizer. That's right. So the randomizer today brings you, well, a random topic. And this particular topic is about nations. We talk about nations a lot, and I think nations represents the biggest social organization that we have as far as organizing people in our civilization. Now I'm not a history profession, and I don't know the exact terms that you're using, but in this random event, let's this is going to be something that we kind of identify as countries, basically nations, states, and stuff like that. The ones that are on the map, and I think according to the United Nations, it's 197, if I'm not mistaken, nations on Earth. But that's not the main topic of this discussion. The main topic is that these entities, these nations, are kind of looked at as something that no matter what should be held together. So any kind of dissent to do things differently is looked upon as being something evil, right? So, that's one thing. Or the idea of one nation conquering another nation is something that's frowned upon. And I can obviously imagine why. I mean, especially for the person being conquered. However, if we look at the birth of just about any nation, there's almost no nation that comes together in a peaceful way. I mean, the matter of fact, I'm not even too sure you can have a large tribe that comes together in a peaceful way. Because here's the thing you have to think about. Regardless of what period there was, whether you go back to the, whatever, first century or whatever, people would like to do their own thing, for sure, right? So, if you have a situation where you have, I don't know, I'll just make up a number, 100 people or 1,000 people get together and decide to do things in concert, that in itself is not natural. I mean, of course it's natural in the sense that you do have such hierarchy in the animal kingdom. We have a lot of social animals. But the point is, this is being done, when this happens, the individuals in that structure do this out of necessity, right? And so that's the key part, the necessity part, out of necessity. Now, you can just do it because there is just the carrot, meaning that an individual joins the tribe or the nation because, or actually, let me rephrase that. Because you're born wherever you're born. If you're born in the tribe, you're born in the tribe. If you're born in a particular nation, you're born in a particular nation. But the main point is that the individuals decide to stay there out of convenience, right? You always have a choice. Some people might say, oh, well, you don't have a choice. But you always have a choice. It's just that the alternatives is just so bad it doesn't really come into question. So, for example, if you take our society and say, well, you can either live in the society or go off the grid, as they say. Well, if you go off the grid, there's a lot more work you as an individual have to do. Of course, the main benefit is like you are totally free, but that presents its own danger, from medical to natural predators, because wherever you go, you, at the very least, you're going to need food, air, and water. Now, unless you're on Mars, air comes for free. So that's not a challenge. Water, that you have to go look for, but it's one of those one-time purchases, one-time purchase, if you will. Once you expend the energy to find the source of water, then normally you're good after that. Just stake your ground, you know, stay there, and then you'll always have access to that water in nature. A river or a spring or ice. Now, the third part is the challenging part. The third part requires, which is food, requires you to expend energy every time you need to acquire it. And so that's the part that's going to discourage most people as opposed to just walking down to the supermarket or taking an Uber, or better yet, having it delivered to you. Then you don't have to expend that much energy. And of course, the variety is much, much, bigger choices. But then the price for that is literally a price for that. There's an association. You have to trade certain things that are, in some cases, harder to get than maybe living off the grid. And of course, you have to. The fact that you live in a society, you have to curtail your behavior to accommodate other people living nearby, or in many cases, not so nearby. So that's how that goes. So that's just the part that deals with why you may want, on your own will, stay in the social structure. So that's the carrot. But of course, no nation survives just on the carrot. A nation also has the stick, because a nation doesn't exist if everybody just goes there and do their own thing. And so a lot of people may actually decide that it's worth it going off the grid. And a matter of fact, they can go off the grid and convince other people to go off the grid. And in a weird twist of the way things work, they end up forming another mini nation elsewhere. So now the original nation will have less people. Less people, the less effective you are. If you don't have a force multiplier. So the people that run, because in any kind of social structure, there's a hierarchy, right? And so people who are in charge of keeping things together are gonna, just by definition, have more power. That's just the way it works. It's not even like an evil thing. That's just what happens. You need certain people, and it can't be everybody, to keep order, or law and order. I don't really like to use that term, but I think that's what it is. Law and order. So those people, because of that, because they keep law and order, they're going to have some advantage over everybody else. It's just the way it works. If nothing else, they will have a heads up for obvious reasons. When law is going to be enforced, or when the order will be forced upon you, when the order will be enforced. So that knowledge alone, the idea to know when certain control measures will happen, gives them an advantage that they can sell to other people. So, long story short, on that particular line of thinking, is that the people that end up running the structure don't want that structure to die. So that's where the stick comes in. So the people that do want to break themselves off are going to be frowned upon. And then there's going to be the stick. The stick, which is, if you leave, not only do you have to deal with trying to survive in the wild on your own, but I will be out there hunting you. That's like a double whammy. And those two things are enough to really, really make people just stay within the group or the nation. And it's their choice of a sort. But not necessarily really. So they'll probably have to deal with rules that they don't kind of like. But it is what it is on that part. So that's the carrot and the stick part of the way the tribe or the nation, having so many people, do follow the same general direction. But it doesn't end there, though, because a lot of times, not even a lot of times, at the core of any social hierarchy, you only stay together if you have energy, right? That's just physics 101. That's everything. Everything that moves needs energy. Or, to be more precise, everything that changes directions need energy. Any mass, any matter that has a change of velocity will require energy. And so, since we are a complex machine, we're going to need energy. And that's the very basic. So what happens then is that you're going to have one tribe say, wait a minute. It just so happened from the way geography is set up that the people over there have access to better resources, or it's just they have better access to resources. Maybe they have a more fertile ground, or they have access to the water and stuff like that. And that advantage will give certain group of people the edge. And left alone, just if everybody is, if all groups are just naturally just good people without having any kind of idea to harm their neighbors, the group with the better resource will eventually be the people that run stuff in the region. They have better access to energy. They can do a lot more stuff. They got better stuff to material, so they can make more stuff. And when you can make more stuff and are more prosperous, you get to live more efficiently and control your environment more efficiently. And if you can control your environment more efficiently, your chances of demise goes down, which means that your people end up having the better abilities to survive. And that leads to more of your people, less of the other people with bad resources. So for that and other human desires, one tribe may conquer another, and when they conquer, it's the typical, death or do what I say. And as long as the do as I say is not so terrible, most people will say, all right, I'm down, you got me. So that's how that works. But of course, in that process, there will be some elements of the society being conquered says, I ain't doing that. Well, and usually those people end up not doing a lot of other things too, like living. All right, so the point is, so now we get to the point of beyond tribe. We get to a nation. See, the thing about a tribe, it's easier to keep a tribe together because all of the people that are under that one rule, chances are, they're experiencing the same. They're experiencing the same geographic environment, which means that they all have equal access. Individuals have equal access to the river. They have equal access to the temperature, right? Meaning that they all feel the same temperature. When it's cold for everybody. When it's hot for everybody. Now, people can have artificial means of cooling themselves or heating themselves. But the point is, they will certainly be aware that it's hot. They can mitigate that, but they'll certainly be aware that it's hot or that it's cold. Or if there's a disaster, everyone will know it. So the point is, it's easier for those people that are in a small geographic area to understand why certain rules are being passed and how the rules that are being passed, in many cases, will affect them all the same way. As this tribe gets bigger and you end up with nations, the hierarchy becomes more complicated, right? But one of the main issues that you're going to have, which you don't have in a small tribe, is the fact that the climate, not even the climate, the environment changes. It doesn't even have to be climate. The environment changes. You may have one group close to the river and another group that's not. So when you do your harvesting and stuff like that, well, guess what? The people near the river are most likely going to get the fresh fish. right? The other people, they might get fish that's slightly rotten or whatever, because remember, the people that are near the river don't necessarily have an incentive to come up with refrigeration methods because they're good. Now, the other people that are not close, they might have a complaint that the fish is doesn't taste good or it's kind of bad or whatever. But the people that are near the fish that are by the river that do the fishing, they might not care, and so that is a source of tension. And that's just a simplification. It happens for a lot of other things, whether you're talking about fertile land and stuff like that. So, because remember, this is what starts to happen when tribes expand and you start to conquer other lands in far distant places. The interesting thing, and I heard somebody say this, like most nations expand more east to west than north to south because east to west has a similar climate, or has the same, similar climate more or less than north to south. So therefore, it's easier to keep things together. Now, I think one of the countries that doesn't follow that rule, I think, is Chile or something. The one in South America along the Andes on the west coast of South America. That's a long, thin strip of land that goes up and down. Lots of climatic changes there. But usually, it's east to west. But the whole point is so the nation comes together for whatever reason, and you have individuals in there that at some later point, maybe hundreds of years in the future, that say, hey, because actually here's the thing. The climate, once again I made a mistake, not even the climate, the environment changes. And especially in today's world, the environment changes, and part of that is man-made, in the sense that we are part of the forces that drives the environment. And when I talk about environment, I don't necessarily mean the ecological environment. I'm also talking about the financial environment. And why is the financial environment important? Because the financial environment controls the actual environment, right? So the ability to find shelter is not based on the ability. It's not based on the ability of your ability to go ahead and cut wood. It's about where you stand in the social structure to be allowed to get wood, even if you cut it yourself. And that's determined by humans. So that also sets the environment. And especially once you get into trade, even local trade, as it gets bigger, it becomes global trade, that also sets the environment in terms of how you're going to survive. So the point of that is, as time goes on, the initial environment that got the tribes together, that was sustainable, that where the carrot was big enough that you didn't really need the stick. The environment may have changed where the carrot is not big enough anymore. The advantage of being in that society is not big enough anymore. And so now the society wants to stick together. You have to increase the stick, right? So just from a quick way of referring to it, imagine you have 0.8 carrot, 0.2 stick. In such an environment, a lot of people would just be, hey, I'll join it. That's pretty cool. I don't mind these minor inconveniences, but the benefits are great. But then, 200 years, 500 years, 600 years from now, your descendants, everybody else, you're born into this system, but the system, like anything else, just cannot sit still because it's all a loop. People make decision change environment changes people, and people make decision. So you're not going to get a stable environment, no matter what anybody says. Environment will change. And as environment changes, imagine it as being a filter. As this filter changes, it's going to benefit certain people and not other people, regardless of whether or not it's designed to be like that. Even if it wasn't designed. I mean, that is the because no matter what, at the end of the day, it's still survival of the fittest. Fittest, because people get this wrong. It's not. It's not about whether or not you're physically fit. Fittest. Think of it as like uh, an a cube a cube hole and a block cube, right? So can the block cube fit into that whole cube? It fits in there. That's where the fitness comes in. It's not about whether or not you're gym fit, you're the strongest. It's like survival of the fittest, the person that fits that particular thing. So you don't have to do anything to be the fittest. So as the environment changes, certain group of people, even without the human motivation, which I'm sure will be there, will benefit more than others, right? Simple example is you look at the as the climate changes, you know, whether or not you think it's slow or fast, it is changing. Cities near the coast, as the sea level rises, will have to deal with rising sea level, and some will have a way to do it if they can afford to. Others may have to abandon the city. But the point is that the advantage that they may have had in the last 700 years of being near the water will all of a sudden become a disadvantage because now their city would be underwater, and the other places that were far away that didn't have that advantage of having coastal property or whatever, now they may get that benefit, or the people who benefit now that were near the coast are no longer, right. So the value, the property value, another man-made concept, will become better for those people more inland that they didn't have before. And then suddenly, you have a situation where the environment, because of wealth, has changed for those people. So so the environment always changes, right? So then the question then becomes, what should those people do that are now at a disadvantage, right? Because the nation or the tribe, however we want to look at it, will not just let you go. Because one of the problems with letting you go is you have to issue with, well, it depends on the type of resource that you're sitting on. Because maybe it turns out that your location is strategic in the grand scheme of things, or maybe there is access to minerals. Doesn't matter whether it's above or below the water, there's still access there. So people are not necessarily going to want to let you go. But the point is, the advantage that you had before is no longer there. You're subject to rules that no longer benefits you. So in that case, people would want to leave. But if the nation doesn't want you to leave, they will use force, or may use force, but I can almost guarantee they will use force. Matter of fact, actually, when it comes to nation, I read a while back that one definition of a nation is an entity that has a monopoly on violence within a geographic area. Right, and that's important. Actually, just the other day with the Supreme Court ruling, the Supreme Court in the United States ruling on the gun rules about, I think, the Second Amendment. I hope that's the correct one. Being able to bear arms was more about self-defense, and so that way the government doesn't have a monopoly on violence. That's not how it works. The point is, the government will always, in a country, will always have a monopoly on violence. However, that same government is also authorized by itself, obviously, to delegate that power to other people within its sphere of influence. So therefore, when it comes to self-defense, the state has to authorize you the right to defend yourself, right? So a nation is still, in my book, an entity that exercise monopoly of violence in a geographic area. Because if a nation can't do that, it won't be a nation because other people will use violence on it, and clearly, if they're going to use violence against the people that want to have a nation be a certain in a certain geographic area, it won't be a nation. So they have to have the power to exercise, to have a monopoly to exercise violence. But anyway, this is one of the longer videos that I've done so far, and I'm pretty close to the end. But the main point is that so where does this leave us? So a group of people will say we don't want to be down with you, and then the question then becomes: do the other people just say, "I hear you," or did it fight back? Especially in today's world, when you have a complexity. I mean, because you have before in the way back when the main thing the entities that want to go their separate ways. Well, actually, they don't want the the issue there was may have been what are the geographic significance of this area that we're going to lose, or what are the resource advantage or disadvantage. But today it's a lot more complicated because you actually have production. You have production facility on those locations. You may have a military base and all that stuff. So that becomes more complicated because you see the thing is when a certain group of people want to separate, people separate. They want to keep that land they're on because I mean otherwise it's not a problem. If a whole bunch of people just want to leave, that's fine. They leave, but just leave the land behind. But that's not how it works. They want to keep the land, and once you keep the land, the problem is that over the years, a bunch of other people have added to the value of that land. So the question then becomes, what gives you the right to then take it all for yourself? So we have these issues, and so the bottom line for all this then is what is the right thing to do, and that's the part that I don't know. But the one thing I do know is that when you have wars, conflicts, because of separation, it's not necessarily a thing about this person is good and that person is bad. Because if people want to leave, it's easy to say, well, they should have the right to leave. Well, yeah, but it's not about people just leaving. It's about people leaving along with all the stuff they already have. And so that in itself, you have to look at it from the other person's side of view that may be losing a whole bunch of stuff, right? If you have one really good high school in a particular town or village, and then the people around there want to be separate, and they're going to take that high school with them, I'm sure the rest of the town or city will have something to say because they don't want to lose that. But since you can't just tell the people to leave and leave the high school behind, you need to figure out what has to happen. So in many cases, the group that has the group that can implement violence more efficiently will usually win out. As much as people don't like to hear it, that's really what it comes down to. And then one other thing too I add with that, you also got to worry, especially in today's modern world, modern meaning that probably the last 800 years or maybe even more, 1,000 years, is that you might have nations in far-flung places also want to influence you by convincing people to break off a bigger nation. So that has to be also looked at. So so you really just cannot tell by a group of people wanting to leave whether or not they should just automatically have the right to leave. Because if everybody has the right to just do what they want to do, then there is no point of a nation. Because you got to remember this: a nation will always win over the individual. Because if the nation doesn't win over the individual, then what's the point of the nation? Then we may as well just be individual people. But since we're not, we're part of a nation, the nation will always win. And if it has to resort to that monopoly of using violence, it will. And that's the sad part. But I don't, not too sure there is a solution. Well, actually, there is a solution. And this, you've seen this throughout history. The solution will always be that the people, the least violent solution would be if there are lands available in far-flung places, those people would just leave and go to a place and establish their own country where the main people they don't necessarily care once you leave, because remember, like I said, the main contention is the land itself, not the people. Could care less if you leave, but it's the land. So if the people decide to leave and form their own nation or tribe somewhere else, that is the solution. But obviously that's not practical, especially now when we have discovered just about everywhere on Earth. However, the randomizer, I don't even remember my own name. The randomizer will leave you with this one final thing. That's where, potentially, Mars can come in some distant future, of course, where people can just go ahead and leave and start their own thing. But we're talking hundreds of years, because that requires one of the things that we don't have just yet, and I talked about it in my other randomized conversation, is the individual needs to have the ability to live on Mars without a big conglomerate company. Anyway, I'm done. This was the longest video. I think that was the plan, because I haven't made a video for a while, and I wanted to just go on for half an hour. But anyway, this is the randomizer, randomizing thoughts. Talk to you later.